Good morning. Before we begin this morning, I'd like to just share some announcements that are going on in our congregation. We do have a Legacy Oaks Senior Center worship today, immediately after services. If you'd like to help, volunteer, it's always encouraging to have anyone who goes, no matter your age, or if you'd like to also help with maybe a prayer or a song, or simply just attending. That is today, and if you have any questions or would like to participate in that. That's 3 p.m. today after AM services, so you're able to go get food, come back, and it's here in Azle, not too far away. And if you have any questions about that, Robert Dotson, if you can get a hold of him, he'd be more than happy anyone who's able to go. A couple more announcements. Northwest Youth. As you know, we're towards the end of the summer. School's about to start. If you know any youths or you have any in your own household from 6th grade to 12th grade, on Wednesdays an hour before services start, so that's at 6 p.m. We'll actually meet every Wednesday of each August starting this Wednesday, and we'll have pizza for them, and we'll get to play some games, and it should be a good time, a time for fellowship. And again, as school is about to start, I'm sure many of those kiddos are not excited about that. Other than that, we do have the Fishers of Men class starting soon. If that's something you're interested in, Dave Lyon, please get in contact with him. That is always great. It's a 12-week in-depth look of how to maybe start a Bible study, how to be more evangelistic mindset. So if that's something you perhaps want to further your skills or just polish your skills, or maybe want to sit in there, maybe even share some notes of yourself, that attendance is always welcome. Other than that, that is all the announcements for this morning. Make sure to always look into your bulletin. We have plenty of prayer requests, many people with birthdays, anniversaries, so I always encourage everyone to always make sure to look at our bulletins. We have so many people to help with that, to make that work able, and so that we can all use it. If you will, turn to your Bibles to John chapter 11. If you're noticing our timeline of this quarter, we have been going through John, and we're a little ahead of the halfway mark of John, and we see a very interesting point where we're actually going to start seeing a week at a time. In other words, we're about to see the death of Christ, spoiler alert, and we're actually going to see, moving forward from chapter 12, which we most likely will be able to cover and complete today, we're going to see that last week, and I'll touch that a little more, but just want to put you on perspective that we're really looking at the end times of the physical portion of the life of Christ. So we see a very interesting, a very shift, things starting to take notice, a lot of prophecies, and we'll make sure to touch every single one of those as we go. So if you will, John chapter 11, before we begin, I'd like to just do a recap of where we are and what we're talking about. And before I do, I'd like to just share again, I always enjoy maps. If you look at the map, you'll be able to see that we are actually right here in Bethany. We saw Christ coming from Perea around the Jordan, and then we see him now coming to Bethany is where we're at right now. And I'd like to just take notice again that this is a day's journey from where he was around the Jordan all the way to Bethany, which is east of Jerusalem. We actually see a 1 day's journey worth. So we will read in a second where Lazarus has died for 4 complete days. Well, we see Lazarus most likely died. They then sent a messenger to Christ where he was going, so that's a full day. And then Christ then stayed 2 additional days before he then came to Bethany, to where Lazarus was. So we see 4 full days. That's kind of the timeline. I always like to piece things together in my mind. It helps me clarify things, but if maybe that helps, and it's just a tidbit. Last week we looked a little bit, again, the verses 1 through 16. Jesus knew the end of his story. He has all and full authority. And we're going to take notice that that is a common theme that gets explicitly said throughout John in these final chapters. We also see that the dynamic between these siblings and Christ is very tight. We actually don't really know maybe the history of Martha, Mary, and Lazarus with Christ, but we see that it's very, very knit. We understand that the messenger did not say, Jesus, they are asking for your help. all the messenger had to say was, Jesus, Lazarus is ill. In other words, there was faith, there was an understanding, the relationship was well enough understood that Jesus was going to come. They knew that that was going to happen. Now, they knew that that was going to happen, but then 2 days later, in reality, 3 full days passed before they even saw Christ. So it's very interesting to see the dynamic there and the trust these sisters had unto Christ. We talked about the timeline, and we also see, I said it very briefly last week, about Thomas's courage. He basically says, towards the end of the verse of 16, John 11, verse 16, so Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. The understanding here is Christ is saying that these are the end times. That he is ready and he is proclaiming that he will be crucified, that the understanding that his death is near. However, many of the apostles still don't see that. We get to see that many of the apostles, many of his disciples don't want Christ to die. This 3-year-long ministry, a little more than 3 years, but just around 3-year-long ministry, we have these individuals living, eating, fellowshipping with Christ, and we're talking about Christ, a man who speaks with authority, a man that we saw a couple chapters ago that astonished people from the synagogues, people that were, imagine you sitting here when a preacher comes up and he speaks in such a way where you're just moved every other word. It's something very interesting to see that these men, these disciples, although at times, yes, many of the disciples, many of the apostles could be seen as very childish, I would say. Sometimes they would see things very unfortunate in a very human and physical way. But we hear Thomas declaring, and he is ready. He says, let us also go that we may die with him. So it's very courageous. Sometimes we see Thomas as, doubting Thomas. However, we need to give credit where credit is due. Thomas here is courageous, and he's the first to stand, where at times even Peter is usually the first to stand forward. Here we see Thomas. And it's just something I'd like to always take note. Sometimes we like to bash a lot on Thomas. That being said, we'll go ahead and continue chapter 11, verses 17 through 27, if you will read with me. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give to you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. So we see Christ now coming into the scene. We see that he's actually a little bit away from the actual location of where the house we see that they are grieving with. We also take notice that we see a tradition. This is something that isn't explicitly said. However, we have many historians, well, when I say many, I mean 3, but a couple historians who truly give us an insight of what the tradition, what the views are here during this era of the New Testament. We see a tradition of 3 days after death, your soul is above your body. In other words, you have about 3 days before anything miraculous, before you're even able to resuscitate, to be alive again. The common theme was it was 3 days, and after those 3 days, your soul would then go to Sheol. We'll go then to the underworld. We'll go to, in that sense, many of the Greeks, many of the Romans believed that there was an actual large cavity, an actual large cave, you could say, under the earth where your soul would go. So the understanding is if you died, you have 3 days, and that's the max. After that, you're dead at its completeness. Well, we see and we understand that this is very significant, that we see that Lazarus has died for 4 full days. This would take notice to many readers at that time. As they were reading this, sometimes we need to make sure we're also, a lot of this applies to us today, but it has significance to those readers who read at those times as well. So this is the significance that Christ has full authority over death even after 3 days. Something unheard. If you read many mythologies or anything like that, many people in those mythologies did not resuscitate. Usually it took one day. Usually it took a couple hours. At the max, it would be 3 days. So it's just to further showcase Christ's full authority given by God. We also see something of mourners come into action. It was very customary that you would pay mourners to come into your household during grieving after a death. And when we say mourners, us Westerners of the world, when we mourn, it's very silent. Sure, maybe there's an outcry, maybe there's tears, maybe there's an outburst of emotion. However, we do understand that in our senses of mourning, it's very, very isolated. It's very, very to ourselves. Sometimes, you lock yourself in a room to mourn for many days. However, in the Jewish tradition, you would see a lot of wailing. You would see a lot of complete outbursts, complete cries. And it's not to say this was very common. This was very appropriate. Maybe we look at it as maybe taboos, maybe very different. Maybe I would never do that. But even to this day, if you look at the same Middle Eastern cultures of today's time and of age, you actually still see the same tradition. You still see the same that's going on as it was back then. So you would actually have professionals come to your house to mourn with you, to wail with you. We also see this commandment even given throughout the New Testament of, be joyous when others are joy, or be saddened when others are sad. And we see this time and time again, and we get to see a little difference between, there's a lot of opposition going on here as we've been reading. We even realize that Martha in verse 21, Martha versus Mary, we see a difference of an interaction. So we'll start with Martha here. We see Mary staying at the house still mourning, and we see Martha coming to Christ. Many times, the first thing that I always pop in my brain is, when does Christ interact with other people? Usually Christ comes to someone. Usually Christ comes to us. A perfect example is the Samaritan woman at the well. We see the Samaritan coming to Christ. Christ was already at the well. She came to Christ. And we see this many, many other times. But in reality, Christ came to her. Christ was there first. Specifically, in that scenario, Christ knew that the Samaritan was coming at that time, at that exact day. So he really was there for her. It wasn't the other way around. So here we see a little bit difference. We see Martha actually coming to Christ. We see Christ coming on. He's probably, taking his time, as he took 2 days. He has full trust, full understanding. He knows what's going on, but we see Martha coming unto him. In verse 21, Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Many people have very different thoughts here. Many people believe that Martha is actually rebuking Christ, maybe saying, if you weren't here, if you would have just been here, maybe it's a rebuke. I personally believe it's not in that sense. If you've ever read the Psalms, if you've ever read David and his prayers to God, read that first half of that psalm. Many chapters do this, actually, in many of David's prayers. Pick half of those prayers. Just pick the first half. It would kind of seem that David's kind of saying, God, why have you done this? God, what's going on? Because it's a level of understanding of what comes next. In David's prayers, many times he goes, this is terrible. This is happening to me. I don't know what's going on. But then afterwards, he gives the glory to God. He understands. He takes a moment. He goes, I'm going to just let everything out to him. I believe this is a perfect example of where it's okay to say, God, why? It's okay to say, God, what's going on? But then realize that he's still there. Then realize that he's never left you. Then give the glory to him and lean unto him. And this is kind of what's going on here. Verse 22, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. So, Lord, if you would have just been here, my brother would have been alive. But still I know that you are God. I know you are Jesus. Still I know you are the Messiah. Then Jesus again says, your brother will rise again. Obviously, Christ is talking about the resurrection, not only as Martha understood. We don't really know the level of understanding Martha might have had here, but we see that Martha was an individual that at least understood that Christ was going to develop the resurrection. And that was an understanding that Martha had. So we really see that Jesus is trying to say something else. He says that he is the fullness of this resurrection. He is the resurrection and life. In other words, just because he can have the resurrection, what about the life right now? Just because he will be able to resurrect all later, he still has the power right now. It's not that he will get this power, that he has this power. And this is the understanding that Martha maybe just it didn't click, because obviously, if you look through the Old Testament, even to this standard, we see Dorcas being relived later on in Acts. I believe that's 16. And we also see Elijah, the very first time somebody was revived. We see Elijah do it to a young boy. So we see, this is something of an understanding that resurrection is possible. However, it's the fourth day. However, they understand at least that Christ is bringing the resurrection, but maybe not so that he has full authority and that he has the power. So again, just to reemphasize that, verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he died, like Lazarus, yet shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And of course, her statement is, she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. So in understanding again, I think it's very good to have application here in the understanding that Christ here is talking about the present time where he was, and clearly the future. This is something that Martha was not really understanding. However, we also see that Martha, although was saddened, although was grieved, it was her brother, and says, Christ, if you would have just been here. She immediately goes, but I know you're the God. I know you're the Messiah. I know that all that you ask will be so. Not only that, she understands who Christ is. Not only that, she then confesses it. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. Not just any Messiah, but the Son of God. If you've ever read any Augustus, any Roman emperors, or any of those individuals, their titles used to be Son of God. So this is something that I didn't actually take notice in John chapter 6 and 7, where we see that the Son of Man is used. And again, here it's used the Son of Man time and time again. Somebody once asked me, why aren't we using the Son of God all the time? Why doesn't Christ just say Son of God all the time? Well, first of all, that title was usually given to emperors. Usually when an emperor died, later on their successor would deify them. So many of the emperors, specifically Augustus or Octavius, his name before he was emperor, his title was the Son of God. So it's pretty interesting to see that title actually gave someone, the supreme of the supreme. You are the cream of the crop of the people around. And we clearly see that Christ here he's being told this. So yes, it is saying that Christ is 100% man, 100% God. We understand that she is proclaiming this deityship, but we also see that in those customs, in this era, there's also the sense of extreme respect. Not just that you're the Son of God, the I am, but also the Son of God in the sense that you're even better than the emperors. So that's just something that is just good to note, something just to think about. And as we continue, and after this, we'll stop for a moment. But if we'd like to, please join with me as I read verses 28 to 44. When she had said this, she went to and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, Mary rise quickly and go out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come to her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was cave, and a stone laid against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of a dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there would be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you, for you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I say this on account to the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." A lot going on here. And the whole reason is I want to read all these verses at the same time is to really see it all together. So first and foremost, we see that Martha then calls Mary, and not only calls her, but says, "Our rabbi, our teacher, our master is calling you." This is very interesting, as in this time, usually the rabbis, usually the masters, usually these religious teachers, you wouldn't say that a woman was a student of theirs. You wouldn't say that a woman was a disciple of theirs. So we see this, that Christ is breaking the norms again. We see Christ always breaking these traditional norms, where this was never found even in the Old Testament, where we see that even our priests, maybe many priests at the time, would still give attention to the crowds, to the multitude. That does not constrain anyone. And we also see that Christ was their personal rabbi, their personal teacher as well. So this is just, again, Christ breaking the news. So we see again Martha versus Mary. At first we saw Martha coming to Christ. Then we see Mary staying, and then now she is called. And we also see her then go to Christ. Something very interesting again is why we kind of believe, many scholars believe that these mourners were paid, was the implication that they were there for Mary. Obviously to mourn Lazarus' death, but they were there for Mary, because when she left, they followed her. If it was more of the intimate sense, they would have stayed there. They would have already been to the tomb. They would have already been where they needed to go. They wouldn't have been looking at Mary and completely following her. Maybe they could have, but this is just an inclination. And it was very common to have these individuals be paid as professional mourners. So we also see Mary's interaction with Christ. She does the same thing. However, she actually comes to his feet. She bows unto his feet, crying. We see this sobbing. We see this tearful speech. And he says, again, if you were only there, right? If you were only there, my brother would be alive. However, she says this while weeping. This is the difference that we see. And this is why many people sometimes put in the inclination of, oh, Martha, you were rebuking Christ. And Mary, oh, you were so nice, being gentle, being emotional about it. But the realization of they're both understanding who Christ is very, very important. So just take note, and again, this is the same Mary that in Luke 10:39 we see that she also was at the seating at the feet of Christ. So we see this time and time again, Mary truly putting down her respect unto Christ. However, she still says the same thing as Martha said. Christ then asks, let's go. Let's go see Lazarus. Let's get this done. He understands what he's doing. He understands where he's at. And we see that Christ first says, verse 38, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb, and it was a cave and a stone laid against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. So, I'm sorry, I skipped a portion. Verse 34 to 37, we see that he is then deeply moved. So Christ he's compassionate in this scenario. He's seeing what's going on. He sees the outcries of both sisters saying the same thing, having the same realization of how much they cared for their brother and how much and what's going on in this whole scenario. But we also see that Christ then asks to come and see Lazarus. He wants to go see Lazarus. He wants to be able to do this. And we kind of see a more human side of Christ here. I will say there's two thought processes here, so bear with me as we go into both of these. But the first one would be that Christ was saddened. The notorious shortest verse of the Bible, 35 of chapter 11, Jesus wept. And he wept. And the first thing the Jews that were surrounding him saw was that they said, look, he cries. See how much he loved him. See how he loved him. And then not only that, but they then say in verse 37, but some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? So there's always a but. There's always a contradiction. It's very interesting to see that many people who see Christ, even in today's standards, when we see people getting inner worked by Christ, being benefited by being Christians and truly meaning it, and maybe their mindset is different, maybe their lives are very different, people still look at that and go, no. But what about this? But what about that? They always like to add something else. And the understanding here is these individuals, rightly so, see that Christ absolutely loved him, absolutely loved these siblings. However, they then put a contradiction there. They say, oh, he can do miracles. Why couldn't he keep them safe? But we clearly see in John 7 how we see that this exact miracle, where we see that although they were ill, Christ, the whole reason for that was Christ's statement was basically the reason for all these inflictions, the reason for all these illnesses, and this was with the paralyzed man. We see all these inflictions due for the glory of God. So again, we see here, this death wasn't the whole point, was just to say, oh, he couldn't revive him, to put blame on Christ. But the reality was, Christ said it in the beginning of the chapters. This happens so that you may see God's glory, that you may be able to see that there's a big picture. Christ is seeing the big picture. He knows what's going to happen, and this is how we understand the way he thinks, is he looks at the end goal. He has that heavenly vision, as I like to say it. He has this idea of he's already looking at the end of that tunnel. He's not looking at what's going on here. Obviously, he has an understanding of what's going on. However, he is fueled, he is motivated, he understands what the end goal is. And ultimately, that is for us to come to him. And ultimately was that crucifixion. So here specifically, we see that perhaps, yes, Jesus wept because he was sad. Jesus wept because he was moved. If you look at the original language here, we actually see a sense of this movement of the Spirit, this interesting, I don't know how to properly say it, but it's just deeply moved in our language, and it's actually translated to agitation. It's actually translated to being agitated, to be indignant. So in other words, you could then have two school of thoughts here as well. The reality was, everybody was looking at Jesus wrong. Both Mary, both Martha, not only said, if you weren't here, my brother would have been alive. But Martha again said, I understand what your purpose is, but she didn't see Christ's purpose as of right now. That not only is he the resurrection, future sense, but he's the life now. They were getting it wrong. Again here, the mourners, or the Jews surrounding him, saw that he has love and compassion, but then they got it wrong. So you also see more of a troubling of a sense of they're just getting it wrong. They don't understand the full revelation of Christ and his purpose. The other school of thought where I kind of lean more towards to is this understanding that Jesus wept, which we understand is deeply moved from the two verses before, which means, again, agitated, indignant, is the reality of that Christ is saddened by death itself. In other words, sin. Christ is saddened by what sin comes into. Sin came into the world, we see all the way in Genesis chapter 3, and it led to death. That was God's proclamation to Adam in Genesis chapter 2. We see this idea that because sin came into the world, now we have death. Sin is death, right? Romans, the wages of sin is death. We understand that maybe perhaps Christ is saddened. He's agitated. He's getting frustrated what sin has done. Again, he has this heavenly vision to the end of the tunnel saying, I know that I will conquer death. I will conquer sin. That's the whole point of me. But as of right now, I technically can't do anything about it. I can only help, right? His fulfillment comes later on. However, again, he is not just the resurrection. He's not just the fulfiller. He is the life right now, as he's going to show us here in a little bit in Lazarus himself, of raising him from the dead. So those are the school of thoughts there. Just wanted to kind of put those in your mind. Maybe you've heard them all. Maybe you haven't heard one of them. But again, that deeply moved in his spirit is a form of agitation. is a form of indignant, and that is found through the original Greek wording. Sometimes these Greek words can mean like 10 different words, so it's difficult to kind of find what the genuine wording and what it means. So it's important to look at the context, and that's what I did, at least in my study, with the purpose of having not a tunnel vision, but looking at what's in the future. So as we continue, we see that Christ is obviously saddened. He's obviously upset of what happened. He's obviously angry at death. So what does he do? He asks to go see. We see in verse 39, Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there would be an odor. There is a stench." Obviously, absolutely, after 4 days of death, of decomposition, of just maybe worms or whatever is going on, whatever is getting into your body at that time, there will be a stench. Very physical, very, very moral view. Christ again says, did I not tell you, in verse 40, did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God? He is looking at the end goal. Christ, we just need to keep realizing that he has full authority and understands all. Verse 41, so they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Christ goes into a prayer. Christ goes into a talk with God. And again, it wasn't for himself. He knew what was going on. He had communication, constant communication with his Father. But it was for those to believe around him, to realize that the power came from God, the Father. We'll see this time and time again in these couple of last chapters of John. We actually see that Christ, again, is trying to make it known. This power does not come from Beelzebub, as we see in Mark. It's not come from demons, as we saw earlier in the first couple chapters of John. He wants to make a distinct understanding that it comes from God the Father. So when he had said these things, verse 43, he says in a loud voice. This loud voice is not just, me screaming out this mic or saying out loud. It's a genuine great cry is the translation there. In other words, it's a proclamation. It's a great cry with a lot of passion, with a lot of emotion. And he says, Lazarus, come out. I can only imagine. I wish I would have put in a picture, so forgive me for that. But these tombs would basically just be in a cave, and then you would have a cutout, a rectangular cutout, and they would put the body in there, and then they would cover it with a stone. That is, you kind of carve a whole section so that you can put a body in there, and then you would then cover it, and that was in a cave, and then you would roll a huge stone in front of the cave. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So we see Lazarus quite literally coming out from here, still binded with all of his wrappings, with maybe ointment as they did unto Christ, and they do so many different things unto him, but he just comes out. He just comes out, and the first thing Christ says is, unbind him and let him go. Let him live. There's nothing to it. And obviously Lazarus would have just, who knows? Who knows? We might have so many questions. And I liked hearing a brother a long time ago, he was talking about this subject, and he said, we have so many questions, and we wish the Bible would tell us all these questions. Lazarus, how did it feel like dying? Lazarus, what did you see for those 4 days? Lazarus, how did it feel being able to breathe again after taking your last breath? Lazarus, did you know, did you get to see God? Did you get to see this paradise that we now know of? What happened? Did you get to see Abraham? But it doesn't tell us. So in other words, I always try to tell most people I study with is where the Bible stops, sometimes we need to stop. It's great to have speculation. It's great to have opinions. But please understand that it's not okay to put words where the Bible does not have any. Many times there are implications in the Bible that we can get from. However, here, it's just a lot of questions. Perhaps one day, you're able to write all these down in a journal, and the day it comes, you may ask God himself. You may even be able to ask Lazarus himself. But other than that, that is the complete story of Lazarus, as we're about to go into a new section of John chapter 11. Do we have any comments, questions? Yes, absolutely.
I just want to say what happened with Lazarus was a divine appointment. Meaning, we think Jesus was late, but he was on time. He had the proof of what? By laying him stayed up 4 days, they could smell the death on him. So he would reveal the power of God, show the power of God. So when you do it, they can't have an excuse to fight you. Like, he didn't stay 1 day, he got up, he stayed 4 days. So that Genesis up to John give us examples from when Moses took them to the promised land. Pharaoh was chasing them. They was cornered. God opened the Red Sea. Let them walk through. Those were divine appointment. With Abraham and Sarah, he promised them a child in old age. She was 90 years old. That means the body stopped operating, but they had a child. So God gives us examples of things that are impossible to us, is possible to him. So this was just part of God's faith on this miracle to show us that he have a divine appointment where only he gonna be able to do this. And when he show up, he will show out. So you can see the power of God.
Absolutely. Just to, I guess, put that in a summary, we realize that God has a divine appointment for all. As much as we would like things to happen in our own time, God has a purpose, and usually that purpose supersedes our understanding. And sometimes that purpose supersedes our expectation, as we even see here. Nobody would have thought this would have happened. Or our brother mentioned with Abraham and Sarah, no one would ever thought in such an old age, 90, 100 years old, that they would have a child. Is there any other comments or questions before we move towards the end of chapter 11? Let's go ahead and read verses 45 to 57, John chapter 11. Many of these Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them that what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to gather in unto the children of God who are sacred abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim. And there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up to the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think, that he will not come to the feast at all?" Now that the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone knew where he was, should let them know, so that they might arrest him. So we see the response, we see a response, some very poorly. We see a response of some of them, believed unto what was going on, but we get to see in detail of what the unbelief led to. We see, as always, Christ he creates divisions in our hearts. He pierces our hearts. When he does or says something, it's supposed to mean something. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to divide your thoughts at time. Why? Because we're growing up in the world. However, we are not a part of the world. This understanding of Christ, especially with this great miracle, again, one of his last signs recorded here in John, we see that these Pharisees, some people went directly to the Pharisees. They saw what was going on and said, "Yeah, nope, I'm going to go tell the authorities. I'm going to tell what's going on." And then we see that these chief priests are talking amongst to each other, and they're asking what's going on. So then we see Caiaphas, who was the high priest. We actually see in 15 AD, Caiaphas, this is when he first began. And Caiaphas stayed all the way, I believe, until 37 AD. So we see a distinction that Caiaphas was the high priest at the time of Jesus' ministry. And not only that, but he was also at the time, he was scared. Unfortunately, if you know anything about the Jewish tradition, high priests are not supposed to be the leaders. High priests were not meant to be anyone like we have maybe the president today or a monarch of case. However, the Roman government looked at the high priest as that. So in other words, the high priest had additional things that was going on in his mind, and he was looking at a perspective of, Jesus is making a ruckus. Not only that, but Jesus is proclaiming himself to be God. That's going to go against the Romans' beliefs. That's going to go against what's happening in the rest of the world, this Hellenization world, this Hellenistic or Greek world. So we see this understanding that the high priest is looking at it very worldly. He doesn't even pay attention to what's actually going on. He kind of just looks at, Jerusalem's in trouble. We need to take care of this. So what's the first thing he does? Well, the first thing he does is actually God uses Caiaphas in his plan. Although it was a wicked plan to kill a man, to kill him for the sake of the country, to kill him so that the country wouldn't lead to destruction that the Romans would eventually do at 70 AD. However, we see Caiaphas ordering, let's kill him. Let's arrest him. Let's take care of him. However, this was an understanding of this was God's plan. God used Caiaphas to order this, even though it was wrong for this man, Caiaphas, the high priest, to cast judgment on Christ, who had really nothing going on. As we see throughout his, we'll read many of his judgings, they were all false. They were all wicked. They were all, unfortunately, just corrupt. And we see him proclaim this. However, we have to understand that God used him. Christ needed to be crucified. This was God's plan. He was the sacrificial lamb. And Caiaphas, who knows? Maybe after realizing he changed. We don't really get told any of this. But God does use Caiaphas in the sense to continue God's plan. Is there any comments or questions about this? Yes? Yes, it's absolutely mind-boggling, and I could even say that of today's standards. Many people can read the word, many people can even come to the understanding of the truth, but they still reject. They still step away. Why? Sometimes it's preconcepts. Sometimes they just don't want to admit what's going on. In this case, we see the reason really was, Jesus is taking away a little bit of ours. He's taking the spotlight. Not only that, but we later on, and we see it time and time again. Actually, last week we saw it in chapter 10 where there was individuals in the crowd just waiting and jumping. As soon as Christ says something, we're going to mob. We're going to go crazy. We're going to do something to him. We're going to arrest him. So it's just interesting to see that although they realized what was going on, he must be this. No, let's kill him. We see the glory. We see him saying that the glory goes to God, the Father, yet we're still saying that all his miracles and things are from the devil, Beelzebub himself. So it's very interesting. It is time. If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to come to me after class, but if you will, bow your heads with me to prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this morning, Lord, as it is the Lord's day, a day we're able to just devote time unto you. We understand we have so many things going on in our lives, Lord, our weekly battles, our weekly temptations. Lord, please save us and help us and cleanse us and forgive us for our sins that we may have done, Lord. And please help us realize that you're always there. Help us have this idea as Christ did and this perception of looking at the heavenly vision, looking forward, looking for what your promises are to us, Lord. Please help us as we go into this next hour of worship, may be well-pleasing unto you. And please be with all those who are in need of you, Lord. And we're just so grateful to be here this morning. We thank you for all that you've given us and all your many blessings. In your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.